Well, those were some incredible matches that we saw today at VCT Masters Toronto. Today, June 17th, we had the last two matches to decide which teams would round out the top four. It was G2 versus Gen.G and Sentinels versus Fnatic. And these matches ended up being absolute bangers. Potentially the two best matches of the entire tournament, some insane comebacks in these ones, and some incredible performances by all teams involved, but only two could move on. So we're here to recap and talk about those two matches. Let's get right into it. So this is the board we have today. As you can see, we got both matches on the board, and the first match that we're going to be talking about is G2 versus Gen.G. As a person that does really want G2 to go far in this tournament, this was an absolute nail-biter. Both teams were playing incredibly well. G2 had the early lead, but then momentum swung way back in Gen.G's favor, to the point where they were 2 rounds away from winning map 3, knocking out G2 before they could even get to top 4. However, G2, with an insane comeback in map 3 on Icebox in that second half, they would move on. Gen.G played incredibly well, but G2 were able to find that tenacity when they desperately needed it. Looking at map 1, we have Lotus, this one being G2's pick, a map that they have been dominant on the entire year, but did have some struggles with against Paper X. So with the meta change and Taeho not being as good of a character, was G2 going to start not performing very well on this map? Well, the solution to that ended up being just keep playing Taeho. And honestly, why not? Obviously, the Taeho meta is not the dominant meta right now, but Taeho still has value as a character, starting with a very dominant 10-2 half on their defense side. They start strong by winning that pistol as well as the anti-eco. Gen.G would steal the first one at round 3, but then we have a 3-round win streak for G2. Gen.G just not really finding much of anything, Texture not performing up to the same standard that he has set early in the tournament. That would change later on though. There's rounds like round 10 where Gen.G do end up getting the plant on A, but G2 just end up having a great retake to steal the round from them. Jogamo did almost mess it up by missing a shorty kill, but they did recover from that, so no harm, no foul. And then round 12, the last round of the half, Gen.G, they're trying to push mid, they end up rotating to A, but Trent holds it down, he stops that push from happening, and Munchkin is left alone. He can't win it, it's 10-2. However, Gen.G would start pretty strong on the defense side of their own, making the scoreline end up looking a little bit closer than it ended up being. They win the first 4 rounds of that second half, winning that pistol, getting to the bonus, and then getting the next round as well, so G2 a little bit on the back foot here. We have rounds like round 15 where Texture was starting to heat up at that point. That was giving Gen.G a chance to get back in it. He gets some multi-kills to help take them the round, but it is still 10-5 at that point. Gen.G have a good round at round 16 where G2 would get on site on C, but they end up getting tagged. Gen.G has a nice high-low setup to prevent G2 from doing much of anything on the site when they got there. So that was starting to turn the tide a little bit, but then G2 take the next round immediately. At round 20, G2 with a very determined round to close this one out. Jogamo ends up killing Texture early, and that just really does not help Gen.G's chances of getting back into that round. Comeback is stopped before it even starts. G2 take Lotus. So G2 in control of this match. They take that first map, but then we go to Haven, and Haven ends up being a much different story, and honestly, G2 could have ended it here. However, Gen.G, especially in that second half, played a lot better, and they deserve this one. Absolutely. This one was Gen.G's pick, and when I saw that map, I thought Gen.G definitely has a chance to take this one. And if they go to map 3 on Icebox, it's kind of a toss-up there, so we'll see what happens, but we'll get to that map when we do. But anyways, Gen.G starts strong by winning a good pistol, but then G2 start to play a lot better. They win the next 4 rounds in a row after the anti-eco, and that gives them a 4-2 lead, which isn't the biggest of margins, but for those full rounds, it just looks like they're calling circles around Gen.G, shutting down Munchkin, who keeps trying to get onto that A site, and to no avail. However, Gen.G answer right back. Round 7 ends up being a solid round for them. They would win 2 rounds at round 9 and round 10. Texture starting to heat up at this point. Bit of a disappointment in map 1 for him, but he was absolutely starting to look better around the end of that map and continued that play into this one. However, unfortunately for Gen.G, we still end the half 7-5. So G2 in the driver's seat here. They can close this one out. They just need to have a good attack side. And it absolutely could have gone that way, but Gen.G end up tying the game by winning that pistol and the anti-eco. Very important rounds for them to win there, and then G2 answer back with 3 of their own. However, Gen.G with some good fortune win the next 3 rounds, and one of these rounds being a very crucial one that G2 ends up losing. They end up getting on site at C, they have the chance to plant, however the time ends up being incredibly low and they try to plant, but just just barely miss out on the time. I don't know exactly how close it was, but just based off of memory, it was at least like a millisecond. It was such a close margin, and if G2 had won that round, maybe we don't go to Icebox. Especially because shortly after that, in round 21, G2 end up planting B. However, Texture is headhunting. He's looking to get all the kills. He wants to put this map away. After getting a 3k, it ends up being a 1v1 versus Leaf. And honestly, if Texture just sticks to defuse here, Gen.G probably win this round. However, Leaf, knowing that Texture is going to be aggressive and wanting to get the kill, but Leaf plays it so patiently. He waits until the final moment, knowing Texture can't defuse at this point. Great mind games from Leaf, and that round goes to G2. However, Gen.G answer back in a big way, and they win 3 rounds in a row to end this map. G2 just can't get comfortably on any site at round 24. They eventually do plant B, but Gen.G gets some nice kills on the retake to make it a 1v2 with Leaf. Leaf Saloni only has 7 health. Gen.G kill him. We're going to map 3. So an incredibly close map where G2 lose a couple crucial rounds that could have gone their way, and this one is going the distance. Texture with the big bounce back map. He was leading the whole server with 22 kills. He was +8. Jonah P, the Canadian, having a great map here. 20 kills for him, but Leaf was leading the way in terms of rating. And then we have Icebox, and this was just an absolutely insane map. This one ended up being a 13-11 win for G2, but man, Gen.G really should have had this one. And they start this one strong on their attack side. They win the pistol, they win the anti-eco. G2 get one on round 3, but it's 3 more in a row from Gen.G. They're in the lead, pretty commandingly so. There's rounds like round 5 where it ends up being a 3v2 on A site, ends up with the Leaf being in a 1v2, and he ends up getting a 4k, gets all the kills, but he doesn't have time to defuse. So G2 hitting at this point, but still losing in those crucial moments. Same thing with Haven. G2 does end up winning round 12 with a solid retake. So that's a very important round for them, because if they didn't win that one, they're then down 9-3. So 8-4, a little bit more manageable, but still they are down. And then things go from bad to worse as Gen.G not only win the pistol, but then for the anti-eco, G2 end up forcing. So they buy some Stainers, hoping to get back into this game with a big round, and they just lose their gunfights. So it's just absolutely devastating to G2's economy, and it forces them to have a weak buy for the next round. So they're down 11-4 at this point, and they do not have a lot of money, so they really got to pull something out here. Gen.G 2 rounds away from winning this one at round 16. However, G2, they get the plant on B. It ends up being a 4v4. Texture does get an op kill, and Charon makes it a 1v1 with Trent, and Trent ends up playing it perfectly, saving G2's skin. And G2 ends up going on quite the streak. The tension is so thick during this part of the game, you can cut it with a knife. G2 just cannot make a single mistake, otherwise they're out of the whole tournament. And they end up playing nearly flawlessly for the rest of the game. It was looking so close, but G2 just kept improving their play. They get to round 20, G2 plant B, Texture just peeks out and dies. G2 get the numbers advantage, ends up being a 1v2 with Ash. Ash does almost get that defuse, he does have the spike, but Leaf ends him and the gap is getting smaller. At round 22, G2 can tie this thing. They have all the momentum at this point. Gen.G just can't find any answers. Texture just kind of ends up disappearing at this point. He didn't really have a fantastic round for a while. It ends up being a 5v4 with G2 planted on A. And even though it's a 5v4, Gen.G decide to save. G2 does have a Viper Spit, so if this was a round earlier in the half, maybe this makes sense, but this is to tie the game. So Gen.G end up kind of just giving up around there, and they still lose some players after the fact. So it ends up being devastating for their economy, and that puts G2 in a very good position to win this one. They tie up that game, and then round 24, Gen.G desperate. G2 at match point, and Jonah P and Valen just hold down that B site. Excellent post plant from G2 here. They end up winning those gunfights. They move on with an absolute nail biter of a match. Potentially the best comeback that we've seen at this tournament, and potentially the best comeback that G2 has ever done. Absolutely incredible. Texture did end up having some decent stats with 21 kills. He was +4, but we have a lot more positives going on the G2 side. Leaf leading the way yet again. He's been fantastic for G2 this entire tournament. He had 24 kills on that Killjoy. Looking at the team MVPs, talking about Leaf again on the side of G2, he went 55, 42, and 21, and he won 3 1v1. ones. Very, very crucial wins for Leaf there. On the side of Gen.G, Texture, despite his downbeats, did have a scoreline of 55, 46, and 9, and he had 13 multi-kills. So he was fantastic for large portions of it. And then we get into the economy stats, and this is just hilarious. The fact that Gen.G doesn't win this one is honestly mind-boggling if you just look at these ones, because the pistols ended up being 1 for G2 and 5 for Gen.G. G2 only winning 1 pistol this entire match. Absolutely insane that they won this thing. Eco rounds also quite in favor of Gen.G. 1 eco round win for G2, 5 for Gen.G. In terms of half buys, 8 wins for G2, 9 for Gen.G. And those full buys, that was the main difference. 28 wins on a full buy for G2, 17 for Gen.G. So this was just an incredible match. I'm very impressed with what I saw from G2 here. This was a big game from them. Aside from Paper X, this was their toughest challenge this tournament. They're in the lower bracket. If they want to win this tournament, they have to go through an absolute gauntlet to get that trophy. So we'll see if they can end up going all the way, but they have to face off against their next opponent, who also had a pretty impressive comeback. And for Gen.G, they overall did play quite well in this tournament. I do feel bad for them. They did show some really good stuff. I do think that they should be proud, but they ended up getting out earlier than they wanted. Moving on, we have Fnatic versus Sentinels. This one also being a 3-map banger, a absolute nail-biter for both teams. Huge momentum shifts in this one, and also ending on Icebox. So I guess Icebox is just now the map where we have some insane games on. That used to be Split, but I guess now it's Icebox. So everyone hates that map, but we just had 2 amazing games on it, so I'm fine with keeping it. But anyways, this was a match that Sentinels definitely had the chance to win. However, Fnatic ended up playing a very slow, patient style that ended up getting them that map 3 win, as well as that map 2. So let's go through it. And it started off looking like Sentinels were going to have a pretty dominant game overall. They start this one on Sunset, this one being their map pick, a map that they have had a lot of success on in the past and at this tournament. And they started strong. They end up winning those first 4 rounds. They win their pistol, they convert their bonus, everything is looking good for Sentinels. Fnatic would get 2 of their own at round 5 and round 6, but Sentinels steal it right back. The teams kind of exchange rounds back and forth. Round 11, Fnatic does end up getting a flawless round, so that's a very important round for them to get, makes it 7-4. However, Sentinels ending the half in charge 8-4, and then in that second pistol, Fnatic do end up getting some kills on A site, but they still end up losing the round anyway, Sentinels being very good in the clutch there. Sentinels then win the anti-eco, they convert their bonus yet again. We have round 16, it's a 3v2 on A site, they trade players, and it ends up being a 1v1 with Chronicle and Gen.G. Gen.G was in a situation similar to this in the match against Paper X, and he ends up missing out on stopping the defuse yet again because Chronicle just sticks it, pros don't fake. Gen.G just a little too patient there, and Sentinels end up losing that round. And this is where Fnatic start to pick up a bit of momentum. The map is nearly lost at this point, but they can still make it interesting. Round 20 would be the final round that they end up winning. Sentinels end up slow pushing onto A. Zelsis is lurking, but he gets found. Alpha Year would cut off Sentinels' push, and he does get one. Gen.G also gets killed by Alpha Year. Zelsis is in 1v2, he can't win it. Fnatic are getting closer here. However, round 21 is where Sentinels would take the momentum right back. They get the plant on A, Fnatic slow push them, but they still end up getting the retake, except for Narrate, who is waiting behind the retake, and he ends up getting a 3k on that site. And to clutch the round, he does die by Crashies, but he delays him enough to stop the defuse from happening. Very, very crucial round for Narrate, and Narrate looks great in the next one as well. Round 22 being that final round of this map, Narrate again with some sick kills. Crashies can't hold A. It's a 3v2 in favor of Sentinels. Fnatic gonna have trouble retaking here. Alpha Year does get one, Chronicle as well, but he ends up dying. However, Fnatic turn it into a 1v1, Alpha Year versus Zekin. Zekin very patient, and he ends up winning this one for Sentinels. Sunset goes to the Americas team. Zelsis, the top rated player for Sentinels here with 1.43, but Narrate leading his team in kills with 21. Alpha Year, the start of what would be a very big match for him. 20 kills for him on the Cypher. He looked great all game. Then we move on to map 2, this one being Ascent, this one being Fnatic's pick, and this one goes a lot better for them, especially on their attack side. Ascent being a pretty defender-sided map overall, but they do end up flipping that one. Fnatic winning that pistol, they get the gunfights, Zekin is left alone versus 4, he ends up getting a 3k, but he can't win the round. Sentinels get the first one at 3, but then Fnatic win 3 more in a row, such as round 6, where Sentinels do get some kills to make it a 4v2 in their favor. However, Alpha Year on the warpath, he gets an op kill mid, mid. Then him and Boaster end up going to A site, get the plant down. Alpha Year barely dodges the Vise ult, and then he gets all 4 kills to steal the round from Sentinels. Absolutely huge round from Fnatic there. And the half ends up being 8-4 in favor of the EMEA team, and then Fnatic continued their momentum into the second half. They win the first 2 rounds, and Sentinels end up finding some answers from round 15 to round 17, but it's too big of a hill to climb. And Fnatic at round 20 closed this one at Sentinels trying to get on to A, but they just end up dying. Bang is left alone. He can't win it. We're going to map 3. Bang was the top rated player for Sentinels here. He had 15 kills. He was +1. And Crashies, look at his resurgence this tournament. He has 18 kills. He was +8, 1.30 for his rating. And then map 3, we have Icebox. This one would end up being a 13-9 scoreline in favor of Fnatic. However, Sentinels did start this one pretty strong. It looked like they could have taken it. They win the pistol on B site, that round going to them. They end up getting to their bonus round. They convert it, but Fnatic steal one at round 4. Then Fnatic doing their best on the retakes. They win 3 rounds in a row from round 6 to round 8. Teams go a bit back and forth to end a half. We end up 7-5. So Sentinels in the lead, but Fnatic feeling pretty good about where they're at, and they just need to win the pistol, and then they can get the momentum back. And that is exactly what ends up happening. Fnatic end up going on to A, and Sentinels just cannot retake. Very strong round from them. They would then win the anti-eco. Can't win their bonus. Sentinels does win that one on a retake, but then Fnatic starts another streak. They end up winning 5 rounds in a row, round 17 being a very crucial round for them. A push from Fnatic catches 2 Sentinels players. Alpha Year gets a 3rd player as Fnatic get onto site fairly easily. Round 19 ends up being a pretty entertaining round, Fnatic having all the momentum at this point. They're playing very slow and waiting until around the last 30 seconds to start pushing, and it just ends up working almost every time. Sentinels do shut down Kai. They actually killed him twice because he got revived and he died again. However, Alpha Year gets a jumping up kill. He jumps and then shoots, and it ends up working. I've never done that before, never really seen it before either. Narrate does end up getting some kills though. Fnatic do end up planting. It's a 3v3 situation. Chronicle and Crashies hold down the post plant. Boaster ends up Fortnite dancing right after the one, so that was pretty funny. Fnatic win that round. Round 21, Fnatic are at match point now. Sentinels have not had an answer for a while. It's a 4-stack on A for Sentinels. Fnatic, yet again, very slow to push onto a site. They do end up going A. Second with a nice flash to get Sentinels 2 kills there. They survive for now, but they still need a miracle for this one. But no miracles would be had because round 22, Fnatic, they get onto B. They do end up killing Zelsis with his back turn. Not even a bad play from Zelsis, just unfortunate positioning. Zekin ends up dying. There's not much hope for Sentinels at this point. It's Narrate left alone. He's been really clutch, but not that clutch. He cannot win it. Fnatic are going to top 4. Celsius being the only player that went positive on Sentinels here. He had a rating of 1.04. He had 13 kills. He was +1. Alpha Year with an absolute god map from him. He went 27, 14, and 2 for +13. Absolute insane match from him. Let's also look at his chamber stats here because he was doing great. Yeah, 19 kills, he was +8, having some massive kills on Ascent as well, being one of the main reasons why they won this one. Looking at the team MVPs on the side of Fnatic, we have Alpha Year, who went 66, 41, and 6 for +25. And on the side of Sentinels, we have Narrate, who went 53, 48, and 17 for +5. In terms of pistols, it was even for both teams, 3 apiece. In terms of eco rounds, 4 wins for Fnatic, 3 for Sentinels. In terms of half buys, 12 wins for Fnatic there, 11 for Sentinels, and those full buys, 18 for Fnatic and 14 for Sentinels. So that would end Sentinels' run at VCT Masters Toronto. Honestly, I do think it was a pretty impressive run from them. I think a lot of people were doubting them, especially being the 2nd seed in the Americas. Obviously not the result that they wanted, but I do think that they should still be proud. This was a much better performance at the international level than their Bangkok run, and I do think that they're slowly getting much better. Maybe at Champions they end up being contenders for that tournament. We're not there yet. We'll see how that goes. They just ended up losing to a pretty darn good team in Fnatic. Fnatic at times looking out of sorts this tournament, but they end up getting this one done. Really wanting revenge for losing to Sentinels at Champions last year. Understandable, I would want revenge for that too, but they brought it up a lot post-game. So I guess that is what they needed to be motivated for this one. Ended up working, so I can't really blame them. Great match from players like Alpha Year, Chronicle. This was just very important for Fnatic. So now we have one team from each region in the top 4. That is the 2nd tournament in a row that's happened. That also happened at Bangkok, so I guess there's more parity in the league than some people think there is. I know there's a lot of fans from Asia that say all the Asian regions are the best now because they've won the last 3 tournaments. Listen, man, y'all didn't win for a while, and North America and EMEA both have some pretty good teams. The Americas in general, not just North America. And yes, the Chinese and Pacific teams are in the upper bracket, so you could make the argument that they're better than the teams that are in the lower bracket, but we'll see which region ends up winning this tournament. I will be attending the top 4 matches. I'm actually flying out to Toronto tonight, so if you see me at the event on Friday, please come say hi. I will be giving out these stickers. Got these the other day, so I'm just gonna hand them out to everybody and see who'll take them. But that is it for this video. Let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of those matches? Who do you think is going to win this tournament? Which region is going to be crowned king of Toronto? We will see how that all goes over the weekend. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.